Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ohio State Primetime Call-In Show. I'm your host, Ryan Stano. Garrison will be joining here momentarily, but right now, for the first few minutes, it's just going to be me out here. So this is your guys' show, as we always say. If you have anything that you would like to hear us talk about, please drop something in the chat as well. I can go ahead and drop the link in here for you guys to go ahead and call in as well. But, just to start things out, there has been some news since me and Garrison last spoke to you guys on Monday. We talked about some of the transfer portal things that were happening. And at that point, Ohio State had gotten 4 different transfer portal players. 3 specifically on Monday. Remember, Max Clare was the big one, number 1 tight end in the transfer portal. So he kind of was the big prize that, not a lot of people were expecting to grab. But he was not the only player, that the Buckeyes really needed to get. They still needed help on the offensive line, and they went ahead and they got it. So they were able to land a transfer portal player from Rice. His name is Ethan Onawana, and he was actually a 3-star, according to 24/7 Sports, a 3-star offensive tackle within the transfer portal itself. But he is he's a big dude. He right now stands at 6'5". 6'6" to 345 pounds. He's a big guy. He's from the state of Texas, and he's got a lot of starting experience. And a lot of people like what his potential is because of that big 6'6" frame. So we know he can play tackle, but depending on what Ohio State has, they might end up putting him at guard, depending on what else happens in the transfer portal. So they still have some work to do. And they obviously have some guys currently on the roster who are hoping to make a push in the spring to get that playing time and get that start. So, we'll see what happens. But he was the big transfer portal get for the Buckeyes since we last spoke. Something else that I actually found interesting, and I'm not sure if you guys caught this, and again, if you want to hear me talk about anything, go ahead, drop it in the comments of the show, or use that link. There was a former Buckeye who actually appeared on a podcast within the last week, and he appeared on Amon-Ra St. Brown's podcast because he is teammates with Amon-Ra, and that former Buckeye is Jameson Williams, and he had some comments when he was asked about what he thought about Ohio State. So Amon-Ra asked him what he had to think about Ohio State. He said, "Man, I got nothing to say about Ohio State." There was another clip where he had some other choice words that I won't repeat here, but in so many words, he basically decried the fact that he didn't get any opportunities. And what's it's strange because you think about the team that Ohio State had that year. The wide receiver room specifically was one of the greatest wide receiver rooms anyone's seen. That room produced 4 first-round picks, Williams included, because then he transferred to Alabama. But on the depth chart, he was behind Chris Olave, and he was behind Garrett Wilson. Jackson Smith-Njigba was on the team, but he didn't really play a whole lot that year. But I'm not really sure. I guess Smith-Njigba did play a little bit. But again, of those 3 guys, I'm not really sure who he thought he was supposed to get more time over. At that point, Williams was just known as a speed guy. And really the only, super impact play he made as a receiver was that long touchdown pass against Clemson. That was the only significant play that anyone can remember for him. So it's, when he transferred, he had some choice words for Ohio State fans on the way out. I don't really understand why he didn't like the Ohio State fans or like Ohio State in general. Maybe, again, he's just salty that he just, didn't get the playing time that he thought he deserved. And obviously that's why he transferred. But it's very strange. His NFL career has gotten off to an interesting start. He's been suspended twice already, one for gambling and one for PEDs. So I wouldn't say he's killed it so far in his first few years, but we'll see what happens. So those were the two big pieces of news that I saw over the last few days since me and Garrison last talked to you on Monday. So, let's talk a little bit more here before Garrison gets here about this rematch with Oregon. And I've been watching more film, over the last few days, what Oregon has done since their last matchup with Ohio State. Now, remember, that game happened all the way back in October, and neither team had really played anyone of consequence. Neither one of them had proven anything. Oregon did play Boise State. That was early in the year, and they almost lost to Boise State. Quite frankly, Oregon played poorly earlier in the year. They fixed, obviously, a lot of things, and now they're the only undefeated team left in the country. So they're a really good team. And the film I watched tells me exactly that. Their offense is still running at a very high level. And their defense has the tendency that they can also give up points. I mean, Ohio State scored on them the first time. Penn State put up 38 in the Big Ten championship. So it's not like Oregon isn't gettable. What I'm concerned about is just the efficiency that their offense can move the ball. And it all stems from Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel is someone who has played a lot of football. I mean, when he came into this year, he'd already played at two different universities. So, it's not like he was coming in as a freshman or something like that. He had proven that he was a good player at UCF. At Oklahoma, he was pretty good as well. And he thought this was the next place where he could actually really make a run at a title, and that was borne out. I mean, Gabriel's thrown for over 3,500 yards this season. He's got 28 touchdowns. He's only got 6 interceptions. But those interceptions are something to keep an eye on as Ohio State fans, because some of those came in the red zone. So he has shown that he will turn it over when the field gets condensed. And Ohio State has the best red zone defense in the country in terms of touchdowns allowed. So if they can keep those big plays from happening like they did in the first matchup where Denzel Burke was kind of burnt toast, then they should be able to, keep things close. Now, Oregon's offense is more than just Dillon Gabriel, but that's where it starts because he is also a threat to run. Excuse me. He's got 63 carries for 192 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season. Now, that's only 3 yards a carry, so it's not like he's getting huge, massive chunks. But when he is doing some design runs, whether it's a read option or a quarterback draw, he's being effective with it. And also his scrambling ability is something that Ohio State was going to have to contend with. Now, it's not a large part of what they do. If they're going to run the ball, they prefer to hand it off to Jordan James. He's their bell cow back. He's got over 1,200 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns on the season. He's averaging 5.5 yards a carry. And they've got a backup who gets a decent amount of carries too, Noah Whittington. He's got over 100 carries, 537 yards. He's got 5 touchdowns in his own right. So they've got a few guys who they trust to be able to run the ball. Their offensive line, as we saw in the first matchup, is pretty darn good. Dillon Gabriel was able to set up a picnic in the pocket. So that's something that Ohio State is going to have to fix. Now, the defensive line played great. They played specifically against Tennessee. The Ohio State defensive line played their best game of the season against the Volunteers. Now, the question is whether or not they can replicate that, because the effort that JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, specifically JTT, the effort that he put out there, that was not something we'd seen the rest of the season. Sawyer's been able to get pressure, but he hasn't necessarily translated that into a whole lot of sacks. Tyleik Williams also played really, really well. Just the whole defensive line was able to not just stop Dylan Sampson, running the football when he was out there, but also forced Nico to move around the pocket. And he had to tuck it. He ran at the ball 20 times. He only ran it for like 47 yards. So, they need something similar against Oregon because Ohio State is not going to be able to play the same kind of coverage they did against Tennessee. They're going to have to mix and match coverages. They're going to have to. They might have to play more zone specific to make sure that Denzel Burke doesn't have the same fate he did in the first matchup, because they played a lot of man-to-man, and Denzel Burke was left on an island, and he was burnt. I mean, it wasn't, to be fair, everyone thinks about Burke in that game, but it wasn't just Burke. Davis Enigmanosed also got burned. Jordan Hancock also got torched. So it wasn't just Burke. But Burke was the guy that everyone saw because he's the senior leader, and he was supposed to be this great cover guy after he had such a good junior season. But in that first matchup, Gabriel threw for 341 yards. And it wasn't just Tez Johnson who killed him. It was actually Evan Stewart who killed him the most. Because he had 7 catches for 149 yards, including that 69-yard bomb. Tez Johnson had a 48-yard catch as well. They both had touchdowns. So those long plays, were indicative of the issues that the defense was, had at the time. They had 2 other receivers get over 30 yards on catches. Terrence Ferguson had a 32-yard catch. Trayshawn Holden, the only catch he had in the game was a 32-yarder. So if they can keep those big plays from happening, I'm really bullish on Oregon's chances to make sure that, Ohio State's defense is going to be in this game, because Ohio State's defense has showed up every step of the way since that game. That was the game that made them rebuild everything. They've changed what they do as far as bringing blitzes. They're blitzing more now. They're bringing Cody Simon and Sonny Styles in on more blitzes. And they're also allowing, they're bringing Caleb Downs a little bit more in the box. So because of that rebuilt defense, Ohio State football fans should feel a lot better about what's going to happen on New Year's Day. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Ohio State's offense, because they were borderline unstoppable against Tennessee. Scoring 21-0 right out of the chute in the first quarter. That's the kind of fast start that they're going to need in this game too. But they're going to be playing a different kind of defense and a defensive line who already showed that they could have their way against Ohio State and the offensive line was more whole for the Buckeyes at that point. They still had Josh Simmons for a decent amount of that game. Seth McLaughlin played the entire game. So it wasn't like they were going against their second and third string guys like they are now. Mateo Uiagalelei is someone, as a freshman, that I worry about. They've got a lot of different guys who can push the pocket and make life difficult for an Ohio State offensive line that is still shuffling. Ryan Day mentioned that he is still doing a rotation with the offensive line. So, it's still concerning, even though they played well. You would like to not have that word rotation in there, because you would think that they would have a solid offensive line to go to at this point, whether that's keeping Luke Montgomery as the starting left tackle, or if they decide to keep Saravel there, whatever. Of the 3 guards, and I know I talked about this with Garrison on Monday, I thought Tegra Shabola played the worst. And that's something that definitely concerns me, that right side. And for as well as they played on Saturday, Tennessee does not have anyone at the level of a Mateo Uiagalelei or a Jordan Burch. Uiagalelei's got 10.5 sacks this season. And he's a sophomore. I said he was a freshman earlier, he's a sophomore. And that's a big number. Jordan Burch has 8.5 sacks for himself. So these are guys that are going to try to get after the Buckeyes. And what they'll probably do is they might end up stunting them to the inside and moving them against those guards to give them more advantageous matchups, so they can get more pressure on Will Howard and on the running backs, on run plays, because even though Ohio State didn't, they said they didn't have to run the ball against Tennessee, they're going to have to run the ball here against Oregon, make sure that they win as well. So looks like we got a caller. I'm going to go ahead and add him in. Hello, welcome to the Collins Show. That for me.
What's going on, man? How you feeling?
feel good. Feeling good about this game. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I got to make it clear, man. I'm a Michigan fan, but
Okay.
um, I know you do this show with Garrison too,
Yep.
so I be tuning in. Like I said, I don't like Ohio State, but I'm a realist. I'm not here to troll. I'm not here to do none of that. I'm here to talk football. Um, so just looking at this game based on the first meeting, right? I mean, it was a back and forth affair. My only thing is, what's your name again, champ?
Ryan.
Ryan. So Ryan, the only
Yep.
thing is, I have for some reason your fan base is so fixated on losing by one on the road. Now, let's be clear. Oregon did leave a lot of points on that field that day as well, right? And when you look at it, two botch extra points, a missed field goal, a wide open receiver on 4th and goal that Gabriel, he normally makes that play. And then, of course, the interception that I don't know how in the world that Oregon's team did not challenge that, right?
Yeah, the
But
Kasmeric catch. Yes.
correct. So, but I will say this, right? I mean, it's going to be a hell of a game. This is going to be a slugfest. I think both defenses are gonna have a hard time stopping each other. You guys will need to be balanced to win, right? A
Yeah.
lot of Ohio State fans will cry, "Oh, we should have just thrown the ball against Michigan." Well, look at this stat, right? Will Howard threw the ball 33 times against Michigan, and that was his second most attempts of the season, Ryan. And then his first most was 36 against Oregon. So 33 and 36. And what was those outcome of those games?
So the difference between those games, and I appreciate you calling in here, is let's go ahead and let's. I want to go through those point by point. So first, with the outcomes of those games, the Oregon game, that was a back and forth affair the entire time. Both teams, those are two good teams going at it. Will Howard needed to throw the ball there. Their game plan was much better as far as scheming guys open. He threw for over 300 yards in that game. The last drive, he could have gone down sooner. They could have had a game-winning field goal attempt. I say attempt because we know how Jaden Fielding has been as a kicker this season. So it's not like that was a shoe-in make. So, you know, that game, it was a great game between the two. Now, the Michigan game, that was totally different. The way Ohio State, he had over 30 pass attempts, but the way they schemed those passes, they were not going towards their best wide receivers. They were not targeting Jeremiah Smith. They were not targeting Emeka Egbuka in places where he can be successful. They were trying to throw it to other guys. They were trying to get the tight ends more involved, Carnell Tate more involved. The fact that they only targeted Jeremiah Smith in the second half twice is a crime. And that's why Ohio State fans were so mad about how the play calling went down with Chip Kelly in that game. So, and I know me and Garrison have talked about that at length. I don't want to really rehash the Michigan game right now. What I do want to talk about your point as far as about them needing to be balanced, and I do think that's true. Both Ohio State and Oregon have really good defenses, and also both offenses can explode from the running game and the passing game. Earlier in the season, we saw long runs from Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins taking it to the house because they were able to use the offensive line that were getting holes open at that point in between the tackles. That's not something they've really been able to do over the last 5 or 6 weeks. They got a little better in that Tennessee game, but it's not something they've really been able to show they can do on a consistent basis. So what they did do against Tennessee was they varied up the running game, and that's why they had successful. They weren't just running inside zone, up the gut, or a read option where Henderson was just going to carry the ball for 2 yards right at the center. They had some varied plays. They pulled guards to different sides. They would pull a guard to the right and then run to the left. They had different schemes. And Tennessee was clearly not ready for that. And that also allowed a relatively new offensive line to get downhill and get into the second level. And getting the second level is going to be something that's really important in this game too, because this Oregon team, I showed you those, I read you off the sack numbers for a couple of their defensive ends. They're a really good team when Will Howard's dropping back to pass. So they are going to have to stay but they still have to get their best player on the field involved. And the best player on the field is Jeremiah Smith. He's one of the best players in college football. He is someone that is a matchup nightmare. Now, I could see Oregon shading over where they bracket coverage on him, whether that's a straight double team or they have a high safety help to his side at all times. If that happens, they still need to find a way to get him involved, whether it's quick slants, wide receiver screens, or even a reverse or two, and an end around. They have to get the football in his hands because when he gets the football, good things happen. Howard threw 2 really pretty deep balls to him, and he threw 1 decent deep ball to Emeka Egbuka. Had he thrown it better, it would have been a touchdown, but Egbuka still made the catch, and Ohio State still scored towards the goal line. So, he has gotten a little bit better at throwing the deep ball. I do think Oregon does allow deep shots to be had in this game. So their defense is susceptible to big plays, just like Ohio State's defense is susceptible to big plays. So I really do think it's going to be more of a high-scoring affair. There were 63 points between the two teams last matchup. The over-under, at least when it opened, was 53, which I thought was a little bit low. But, Ohio State's defense has played so well since the Oregon game that I would hope that they would be able to keep Oregon under 30 points, but Oregon's offense is just so explosive. I mean, they've scored over 30 points in almost every single game. There are only 2 games this season where they haven't. That was the opener against Idaho, where they scored 24, and the game at Wisconsin, where they only managed 16 and they won 16-13. So they're an offense that is really, really hard to stop. And I do not think Ohio State is going to be able to stop Oregon's offense. But I also don't think Oregon's going to be able to stop Ohio State's defense. So got this comment from Gary. Don't think it will be as high scoring as people think. I'm really leaning towards, it hitting the over on that 53 number. These two offenses have really, I don't want to say hit their stride, because obviously Ohio State did not hit their stride in that Michigan game, and that was an abysmal game. But last week was about as efficient as Ohio State's offense has been really in the last couple of years since C.J. Stroud left. I mean, that was a total butt kicking up and down the field. They really couldn't do anything wrong. And the running game could have been more effective if they decided to keep their starters in longer. I mean, Judkins and Henderson really didn't play in that fourth quarter. And that, they still had 156 yards on the ground. They still went for 4.7 yards a carry. And Howard, who hardly played in that fourth quarter also, he had 311 yards by himself. There was a chance he could have gone for 400. And Tennessee's defense is pretty good. I think in stretches, they've actually played better than Oregon's defense. So, it's going to be really hard to see what happened. It's going to be really hard to see this game being in the 20s. I don't see either team winning this game if their final score is somewhere in the 20s, even if it's a 28-24. I think you've got to get into at least the 30s in this game because of how explosive the other offense is going to be. This is going to be one of those games where you outscore your opponent. It just is. That's how I think it's going to be. Now, Garrison should be coming in here momentarily, so let me give you some of my thoughts on the other games that are going to be played here, in the second round, before we, finish up here with some Oregon talk once he gets in. So, as the other games go, Texas, Arizona State. The winner of the Rose Bowl between Ohio State and Oregon will face the winner of that game. And that game will be in the Cotton Bowl in Texas. Texas, I thought they should have played better against Clemson on the defensive side of the football. To allow 24 points to Clemson, I thought was surprising. I didn't really think that Clemson was going to throw for as many yards as they did. I mean, Cade Klubnik had 336 yards. On the flip side, Texas could do whatever they wanted on the ground. I mean, they really ran the ball well against Clemson. They had 292 yards on the ground. And that kind of overshadowed Quinn Ewers' another average effort for him. He was 17 of 24, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. So it's not like he was super, super great. Arizona State comes in. They were one of the hottest teams in the country. And then they had that bye, and now they've been sitting on their butts for 3 weeks. I do think Arizona State's a good football team. I'm not sure they're going to be good enough to beat Texas. This is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, so it's going to be traveling for both teams, but Texas is closer. With it being in Georgia, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of fans there for Arizona State. I mean, Texas right now, according to ESPN Bet, is a 12.5-point favorite. That seems that's what it opened. Now it's 13.5. That's very high. I don't know if it'll be that big of a margin, but I do think Texas ends up winning this game. I could see them winning, 30, 31, 21, something like that. I do think Arizona State's going to score. Scattaboo's a good running back, Cam Scattaboo. No one's really stopped him this year. He's got almost 1,600 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns, averaging 6 yards a carry. Texas's defense has shown that they'll give up some yards. So I don't think they're going to have a good enough defense to do that. And that would mean that Ohio State, if they beat Oregon, would end up facing Texas. And honestly, I think whoever wins this Rose Bowl, this Ohio State-Oregon matchup, I think they win the national championship. And I know Garrison agrees with me. He mentioned that on Monday. I think either one of these teams would take and destroy Texas or Arizona State, and they would easily move into the national championship game. I don't think there's really much of an argument that either one of those teams would be able to handle what Ohio State and Oregon have. Now let's move on to the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State's second home. They face Penn State, and Penn State's an 11.5-point favorite coming off the 38-10 victory over SMU. When I first saw the bracket and saw that Penn State could potentially have this matchup, I thought it was going to be a fairly easy path to them to the semifinals. But Penn State has some problems when it comes to physicality. We saw that when Ohio State played Penn State. Right after that 10-0 victory, or right after that 10-0 lead that Penn State jumped out to, Ohio State scored 20 points very quickly. And at the end of the game, when Penn State needed to stop, Ohio State was able to run it down their throat. And Boise State is the best running back in the country, Ashton Jeanty. So they're going to have problems stopping him. I mean, he's got almost 2,500 rushing yards and 29 TDs. Now, I understand Boise State's competition wasn't exactly the best. They played Oregon really early on when Oregon's defense was still susceptible to a lot of different things. So, you can make an argument that he's not going to be able to do that against a Penn State defense that played against Big Ten competition as statistically one of the better defenses in the country. But, the way this spreads at 11, I do not see that at all. I think this is going to be a close game. I do think Penn State is probably going to win the game, but I think it's going to be like a one-score game. I'm thinking 24-21. I think that's, maybe even 21-17. I know Penn State put a lot of points on Oregon, 38 points. That was something that, quite frankly, I didn't expect them to be able to keep up with Oregon, in a high-scoring capacity. Just because we saw them Penn State didn't score an offensive touchdown against Ohio State. Now that was, half a season ago at this point for the Nittany Lions. So their offense has gotten better, but I still think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game. Then we move on to the final game, the All-State Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia. I don't think this game is going to be a blowout on either side. I'm actually surprised that Georgia's still a favorite. It opened at Notre Dame being a 1.5-point favorite, and now the spread is moved to Georgia -2, which I'm probably going to hammer that Notre Dame spread. I think Notre Dame wins this game, even though Gunnar Stockton's going to have 3 weeks to prepare. I don't know if he is going to be ready to play a game in such a such a big game of consequence and not feel the pressure. In the SEC title game, he just kind of got thrown in there, and at that point, he didn't really have time to think because he had no option but to go out there and run the offense. And it's not like Carson Beck was lighting the world on fire either. But Notre Dame is a good team. They dispatched of IU in a game that was not close at any point. They can run the ball really well. Julian Love is someone who can get yards in a hurry. We saw that with the 98-yard touchdown against IU. Riley Leonard's also a threat to run the football, so they can attack Georgia in a few different ways. It really comes down to if you trust Riley Leonard not to make a big mistake, which he has done on a few different occasions this season. He isn't a prolific passer. He's only thrown for 2,200 yards, almost 2,300 yards, and he's only got 17 touchdowns, and he's got 6 picks. But he uses his feet extremely well. He's got 15 rushing touchdowns. So once they get close to the red zone, that read option offense is tough to stop because their offensive line is big and strong, and they're going to push you back. And I think they're going to be able to do that. I think Notre Dame is going to win this game. I think it's probably going to be close. Another close game. I think all of these games are going to be close except maybe that Texas-Arizona State matchup. But I would say give me the Fighting Irish right now by a score of give me 24-17 Notre Dame. I think it's still a one-score game, but I think they're going to be able to get it done. Now, let's do something I don't typically like to do. Let's go ahead and look forward a little bit if Ohio State were to somehow win this game. If they are able to win this game and beat Oregon, like I said, they would take on Texas-Arizona State. That is going to be a matchup that I would personally like. What's up, Garrison?
Hey.
Joining in. I was just going over, doing something I said I don't like to do, which is looking ahead a little bit. If Ohio State were to somehow beat Oregon, how I'd like that matchup between either Texas or Arizona State to get to a national championship game. What do you think?
You cut me off guard there. Arizona State, I wouldn't really worry much about. Even though Scatabo, he's really good. He's really good, man. 22 touchdowns this year, 1,500 rushing yards, 500 rushing yards, receiving yards. Sorry for everybody if you hear noise right now with a bunch of my family. There's 4 nephews running around upstairs. But when it comes to Texas, though, I don't fear them much. I think that they're a really good team. I'm actually a really big Quinn Ewers fan, but he looks uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He looks uncomfortable. Now, where I would have a problem is that their offensive line is, I would say, with Notre Dame, 1A, 1B. They're very, very good, and our defensive line, one day they look great, the next day, who knows what you get, So I would like our chances in both those matchups, especially the Arizona State one. In Texas, I think, of course, would pose more of a threat. Yeah. I don't worry much about them. And then I'm guessing we already talked about Oregon already, right?
I think Garrison's connection's cutting out a little bit.
Oh, shoot. Oh, am I cutting out? Wait a second.
All right, there we go. We're back.
Yeah.
That's some technical difficulties here for some reason.
Am I good now?
Yeah, you're good. So am I.
Right.
For some reason, both of us were having an issue there.
No, I was going to say, you guys, I'm guessing you talked about Oregon already, right?
Yeah, but I want to hear more of your thoughts. I've been talking a while. I want to hear some of your thoughts specific to, we had someone call in and talk about, how, the first matchup, Oregon had a lot of things go wrong for them, and the game was still close, and Oregon still won. So I want you to talk about what you specifically think about the defense for both teams, because I think it's going to be a fairly high-scoring game.
So I'm really excited for this matchup. I've before the playoffs started, I had Oregon going on to win the national championship. A lot of people, said, "Oh, Oregon fans telling me they know I'm gonna pick Ohio State." I don't know that, but I'm here to let you know now. You're damn right. I got Ohio State winning. What are we talking about here? Now,
Getting a little jumpy. Yep.
Oh, am I choppy right now?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. You're getting a little choppy here.
Here, let me come. I'll come back in real quick. 1 second.
Yeah, all right. I'll let you back in. But yeah, I mean, I know Garrison has talked about before how he thought Oregon was going to win the national championship before the season started. So both of us have a very healthy respect for Oregon. They're a really good team. They are really, really good. There's a reason they're the only undefeated team left. So I would not be shocked if Oregon wins this game. I said early on with my prediction, with a very early prediction, I had Ohio State barely winning. I'm not super confident in that answer. So I might change my mind even before the game on, next week. So it's, really, really, it's going to be close here. You good? You got a little bit better connection now?
You tell me.
Yeah, you sound great. So continue with your Oregon thoughts.
So though I believe Oregon's, I think that when it comes to the run game, I don't think it's going to be the same as what happened in the first rendition of this game. I think that our run game will be much more stout against them. Their tackles, they're really good pass blockers, but they're not the best at run block. Of course, our defensive ends and JT and Jack Sawyer are very good at run stopping, but they need to get to the quarterback more. Somehow we got to find a way to get Dylan Gabriel uncomfortable. No one's been able to do that this year, really. I mean, outside really Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I gotta see our offensive line do it one more time.
That's what I said.
I gotta see it happen one more time. And I guess I want Ohio State to win. I think they're gonna win. Is there a part of me that thinks Oregon's gonna win the game too? Yeah. I think you could pick either team in this. I really do. I think it's 50-50 here. I think what's going to come down to, though, is whose secondary can step up. I really believe that. I have more trust in our secondary than I do in the 5'9" guys in Oregon's. They're not, and Oregon's secondary is not bad. That's not what I'm saying, but
yeah.
I mean,
I understand what you're saying. When Jeremiah's 6'3", 215 pounds, he's gonna be a hard matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Cardinell's 6'2", Emeka's 6'2". I mean, think about that pass that he got in double coverage. I mean, Jeremiah ran right by his defender. I'm really interested to see what happens. But give me Ohio State.
Those Oregon corners, I do think, are going to have some problems, getting to stop Ohio State's receivers. But I think the only person that can stop Ohio State's wide receivers is Chip Kelly, as we saw against Michigan. So
yeah,
I think that's something in there. Before we go ahead and let Keegan in here, I got one more question for you here, because like I mentioned, I was talking a lot earlier. What do you think about Ohio State's ability to keep Mateo Uyunglele and Jordan Burch from getting to Will Howard? Because those guys combined for, almost 20 sacks this season. That concerns me because I think they might try to move them inside a little bit on stunts and go against those guards, and that's no bueno.
Mateo scares me. He does.
What do you think?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Mateo scares me. Burch. Josh Fryer has actually been really, really good against larger size defensive ends. Where he has problems is when he's going against guys like
I think we're losing you a little bit.
Oh, okay. 1 second.
It's all right. Yeah, so I think Mateo is the bigger issue. He's a bigger, stronger guy. Well, Garrison's, fixing up his connection issues. I'm gonna go ahead and bring Keegan in here and Keegan, you're on the Primetime Collins show. If you can hear me, I know you got your mic off, but if you're in here, what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, man, I just wanted to ask y'all who you think is the favorites to win the playoff.
That's a good question, Keegan. I talked earlier. I think whoever wins this game, I think is probably going to win it all. Ohio State and Oregon are the two most talented teams in the country. If both of them play their A game, there is not another team that can stop them. Now, what happens when they both go against each other and they're both on their A game? We don't know, because that didn't necessarily happen in the first game. Both teams had a lot of issues. Oregon had some issues with the field goal. They had, Dylan Gabriel did miss a wide open guy in the end zone. They had some issues. Ohio State also had those issues. I mean, Oregon probably should have had an interception on that Will Kast-Merritt catch. So, and then Ohio State, Quinshon Judkins had that fumble early. There were just a lot of things that both teams didn't really get to show in terms of their A-plus game. So I think whoever wins this game, I think it's not really going to have a hard time the rest of the way. I think the only team that might be able to slip them up would have been Georgia if Carson Beck was healthy, but he's not. And I need to see what Carson Beck does. What Gunnar Stockton does in a full game before I really consider him a threat.
Yeah.
What do you think, Keegan?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I think one counterpoint to that is the Alabama teams of old have been able to plug and play a quarterback. And we've seen that in national championship caliber programs in the past. So I wouldn't write off Georgia. I think for me, Texas is my favorite to win it. I haven't kept up with Texas, and I know they lost to Georgia twice.
Yep.
And it was closer the second time. I don't know the health of their offensive line, but if they're healthy on the offensive line, I wouldn't be surprised to see Texas win it.
I think for Texas, I think their big problem is Quinn Ewers, which he is steady. I'm not going to say he's solid. He's solid because he's steady. Sometimes he's steady in a good way. Sometimes he's steady in a bad way. Ewers, he's not someone who can really light it up with this current team, and especially if they don't have Isaiah Bond again, because he's out. He had the ankle sprain. He is their number one weapon, and really the guy that they like to go to on the outside. And Quinn Ewers hasn't really been super healthy all year long either. He's been dealing with an ankle issue. So I think this is a game where it could be, you mentioned Alabama briefly. There could be a situation where Sark gets tired of seeing what Quinn's doing, and he puts in Arch Manning. And
Right.
Arch has shown that he can handle it. He can run the ball. He can make good throws. He can't make quite all of the throws yet. And maybe he can. We just haven't seen it put on film yet because the games he started weren't exactly against the best competition. So I still think Ohio State or Oregon would match up well with Texas because of the fact that Texas's defense, if they can't stop Gunnar Stockton, in the second half of a SEC title game, they don't really prepare against Will Howard or Dylan Gabriel, especially with the weapons both teams have on the outside. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka for Oregon, Tez Johnson. I mean, they've got guys on the outside, and they've got dude movers up front too. Ohio State a little bit less so on the offensive line as well. So, I think Texas is still good. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think they would be able to beat Ohio State or Oregon if they beat Arizona State.
Yeah, That's fair. I think probably the highlight of Georgia is going to be their defense. So um, it's going to be interesting to see, like, is a team with a great defense going to be able to sustain those early losses in the playoffs, and then make it through, or is a high-powered offensive team going to be the one that lasts? And so, are you writing off Boise State and Arizona State at this point, or?
I am for the national championship. Yeah, I don't think either one of them is going to be able to. Boise State, look, they can really run the ball. Ashton Genty is no joke as a running back. He is a really good player, but they can't. They haven't shown the ability against a really good team. They played Oregon early on in the year. Oregon struggled against both Idaho and Boise. I'm giving them a little bit of a pass for those performances. But it's just the level of competition Boise State has played is so much different than what the rest of these teams have played. And I think Genty can run against anybody, but I do worry about them being able to throw the ball with some consistency. Madison's okay. I don't see him being great enough to win a national championship. Arizona State, I honestly think they get crushed between the winner of Ohio State or Oregon. I don't think it matters. I don't think that team has a chance.
Yeah, I would agree with you on both of those.
But yeah, I'm not really giving them either one of those teams any sort of chance to win the game, to win the playoff.
Yeah, I agree on both of those. Although, what was it, 2004? Boise State beat Oklahoma in
2007.
Okay,
Yeah.
2007.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was great. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl's kind of been their second home, so I wouldn't be shocked if Boise State beat Penn State, especially because we know how James Franklin is in terms of playing in big games. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him not be able to step up and really play well, have his team play well, I should say.
Yeah.
And in your point about Georgia's defense, Georgia's got a solid defense. I wouldn't say they're great by any stretch. They and Notre Dame, what Notre Dame does best is they run the football. They are going to run it with Love, and they're going to run it with Riley Leonard, and they're going to make sure that they mix it up between the two. And then they're going to throw an 8-yard hook or a 7-yard slant or a 10-yard curl, and they're going to nickel and dime you down the field. They don't really hit big plays when it comes to the passing game, but they can hit big plays in the run game, as we saw against IU with Love's 98-yard run. So they just got to be ready for that. Yeah,
and to that, I think in the early stages of the playoffs, what we saw was, a better team playing. Remember the BCS days, or the early playoff days, where there was the fourth team that just kind of straggled in, and then they would get blown out every year. I think that's what you're seeing in the separation. You have, what we used to have was elite, and then great, and then good. And now it seems like we only have great. We have great and good. We don't, in my opinion, we no longer have the elite teams because they don't have the depth anymore, because they can get money in the transfer portal and they're gone. And, that's been an issue for
I think the transfer portal's done I think the transfer portal's actually done a good job of leveling out the playing field more than people thought.
Sure.
Yeah. I thought it was actually going to have more of the opposite effect, where it's just going to go to the has-beens instead of the have-nots. Continue.
No, it definitely has had that effect, and it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen, in the future with the transfer portal and people being overpaid just because they're a free agent every year. But that's another that's another topic. But I think what we're seeing is um, a lot of people that did well in the transfer portal are going to have some playoff success. And I mean, look at Indiana. They transferred in like 33 players, and they're right there in it. But then when they take the injuries in the Michigan game and a couple in the Ohio State game,
Yep.
they're unable to replace that depth when they make it to a playoff game. And then you see the talent disparity like we've seen in the past with elite teams. So, what's up, Garrison?
Yeah, Garrison's back.
What's going on, Keegan? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I appreciate you. Man, you were a trooper in Johnny Olden's show last week.
Oh my gosh, that was a long one.
So we were just talking about. Were you able to listen to the conversation, or were you disconnected there?
No, I was disconnected. I was figuring. I had all my family members using the Wi-Fi, so I tell, hey, get off of it.
Yeah.
I got you.
That's all right. That's all right. But before we lost your connection, Garrison, I just wanted to hear a little bit more of your thoughts as far as what you think what the offensive line is going to have to do against Mateo and Jordan Birch. You were kind of cut in and out between that conversation, so I wanted you to circle back to that. Think, how they match up.
Play like a house of fire. Play like a house of fire. I mean, they have to capitalize off of the performance they had last week. I don't know if Oregon's defensive line is better than Tennessee's, or if Tennessee's better than Oregon's. I think they're two different types of defensive lines. But these guys are very strong and they're very big. We talked, on Monday, and I said they mirror Ohio State's, where they have big defensive tackles that are athletic, and then their defensive ends are just huge. 260, 250, 270. So, do I expect that same performance? No. That's probably why I'm not confident in picking Ohio State in this. But if Chip Kelly can keep scheming up what he did last week, rolling out with Will Howard, having two of your guards pull to the left, got your running backs and wide receivers going to the right, doing things like that to get the eyes moving, I think that's how the offensive line can, perform well. I don't think they can perform well against Oregon's defensive line just off pure talent.
I agree. I think they're a more talented team right now, at least up front there. Mm-hmm. Here, Keegan, thanks for the call. I want to get Garrison's thoughts here a little bit more towards the end of the show, but you take care, Keegan.
All right, thanks for taking
Thanks
the
call in, Keegan.
So, I want to hear your thoughts. I mentioned this early on in the show. I want to hear your thoughts about the new Rice offensive tackle that Ohio State was able to get. Ethan Owanoa. I want to know what your thoughts are on this kid.
Oh, first off, I wish I brought my smelling salts. My goodness. But I'm very happy about it. I would assume that he's going to be our left tackle next season. If Fryer, if Fryer's going to be the right tackle next year, because Fryer can't be left tackle. We all know that. So I'm very happy. He's a very good player. Big, 345 at 6'6", is he?
6'6", 345. He's a big boy.
And the fact that he can be that size and play up left tackle means he has good feet. He's very athletic. He moves well, gets his arms out, doesn't allow sacks. And that's exactly what Ohio State needs going into next year, especially with depth. Depth is going to be a conversation going into next year. We all know that. I don't even think that I still don't think that we're deep at offensive line. No. I think we probably agree with that. But to get someone that talented, he's an all-conference player. Those are the type of guys you need, not guys that come out of high school 4 and 5 stars 3 years ago. You get guys that have had proven production at their position where they are. That's what's most important. I think that's what he provides.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Philip, the kid they got from Minnesota, Philip Daniels, he might have something to say about who starts a tackle as well. So I agree with you as far as their depth. I'd like to see them get like one more guy in the portal on the offensive line. We'll see if they're able to get Thompson. That Josh Thompson would be a big get on the offensive line. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. It now sounds like Tennessee's kind of dropped out of the fray for that. So now it's just between Ohio State and Auburn for him. So that would be nice to get. Do you have any? What is your, before we get out of here a little bit, I want to hear what your biggest concern is for Ohio State taking on Oregon. Is it the offensive line, or is it maybe the kicking game or something else?
I think if Oregon can run the ball, we can be. And I'm not saying we'll get blown out, but if Oregon can run the ball, we're in trouble. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because that just tells me that we're not getting any push at the defensive line. Our linebackers aren't able to tackle, or they're not seeing the play well, and then that just means that they can do whatever the hell they want to, and that's not the position you want to be in. Now, I don't think we're going to shut down the run game the same way. I don't know if we're going to shut down the pass game.
So my largest concern, I think, is actually if this game ends up getting into another close game like it was in the first matchup. And I know Ohio State fans were hoping that, hey, if Will Howard gets down, with time on the clock, they could call timeout, they'd have a game-winning kick, and they would have made it. No, there is no guarantee that kick goes in. We obviously know Jaden Fielding is still a problem. So that's a massive, massive concern. So if that ends up getting hurt, that's a problem. Here, Jay Lake, chimes in. Biggest concerns last week's performance was the exception and not the rule. Garrison's you've mentioned that several times. You want to see them do it again, specifically up front on the offensive line, and I agree with you. And I am concerned because that was the first and only time they have shown that they can put a complete game together. What do you think? That's a huge concern for me.
No, that's a big concern for me, and we've talked about it at length. If I want to believe, I don't think that the Tennessee game is the Ohio State that we usually get. I don't want to take the best performance the same way I don't want to take our worst performance, which would have been against Michigan. I want to go somewhere around the middle, which would probably be somewhere around Penn State, Oregon game, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, just getting back on what my biggest fear is, also Dan Lanning. Because there's a chance, man. There's a chance where he just happens to be that damn good. And
he outcoached Ryan Day in that first game.
Yeah, and when you have a guy like him that's just that good and that great at coaching, it's tough. Like when you have great, it's one thing to have great talent, but when you have great coaching, it just puts you over the top.
Yep, I agree. I mean, I think those are things. Those are all things to be concerned about. And if Ohio State would have played some better games, heading into that Tennessee game, more A+ games that we'd seen on film, I think we'd both feel a little bit better. But it, that is what it is. That Ohio State is going to be able to, they're going to be able to throw the ball just all over the field? Or do you think that they're going to have some balance? Because I think they will have to have some balance, but I still think you need to have Jeremiah Smith targeted, 8 times in this game at the very least in order to win.
Yeah, I don't care about the rushing yards. If we were to get 4.5 to 5 yards a carry, I'll be happy. I think we can take advantage of that secondary. I think we really can. We saw Will do it already, and I think a lot of people forget this. Yeah, we can point to the end of the game, but we didn't have a running game in that second half. Will Howard was the reason we were in that game. So if we're able to run the ball, man, it helps. It helps a lot. I think it just helps a lot. I mean, we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if Ohio State can run the ball, I think that definitely helps open everything else I don't think it needs to be the focal point of the game plan. I think it needs to be something that they are able to do and can do because they want to, not because it's necessary to win the game. Because I'm not sold on the offensive line also being able to get to the second level as easily as they did against Tennessee. I think Oregon's defensive line is probably a little bit more stout. I think Tennessee's defensive line was probably a little bit overhyped based on what we saw. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. But, I know we were and also here, different weekends to prepare versus a week. That's also fair. There's a rest versus rust argument to be made for sure, Jay Lake. I think it was probably good for Oregon to get that rest though, with how long the season is now with the college football playoff expansion. If Ohio State does end up playing for a national championship, they're going to play 17 games or 16 games. So it's a lot. And any extra rest you can get, the better. So I think Oregon probably has an advantage in that end, but also, to be fair, Ohio State's coming in hotter than any of these other teams in the playoff.
Yeah, I don't know if I really believe in like if you rest for too long, it doesn't help you, or it can be a negative factor for you. I think at a time like now, you need that rest. And it's well deserved for Oregon. It's well deserved. They ran the table 13-0, man. They did that, and before that, they played.
They deserve all the credit.
Yeah. So, and by the way, do you have a score to the game?
So right now, I had, I still am gravitating towards that 38-35 score that I had on Monday. Things might change before, we got one more show before the game. We'll have it on Monday. And then I think I'll have my final prediction locked in by then. But right now, it's still just, I just think it's going to be high scoring. It's going to be close. I think it's a coin flip. I really do. I would not be shocked if Oregon won this game. I'd not be shocked if Ohio State won this game. I think it's now, if Ohio State plays, I did against Michigan, Oregon's going to win easily. No problems. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a close game. And we talked about this earlier in the week. Whoever wins, I think is going to win the national championship. So
right. I agree with you.
Yeah. I think we've both had some connection issues here, so probably going to go ahead and call it here.
Yeah. Not doing this again. Not here.
Yeah. I've seen some stuff on my Wi-Fi pop up here too, so I probably need to reset the internet. So our next show is going to be Monday. We'll be back with Primetime Live again on Monday at 8. So, if you can, please catch us then. Like, subscribe, everything. Hopefully we'll be both having some better connections here and we can talk a little bit more. There's definitely be some news that happens here over the weekend. So anything else you want to say here before we get out here, Garrison?
No, man. It's Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you guys had a good holidays. Hope you guys got some good time with family. Yeah,
happy holidays to everyone out there. And we'll see you Monday. OH.
I